Good evening. Welcome to Connection. I'm Pastor Phil Emerson. It is so good to have you with us this evening. Jerry and I are here excited because we're in the midst of a brand new year and a brand new style to our Connection show in which he and I are kind of just talking back and forth. And we want you to get right involved. So get your cup of coffee and get into your chair and get ready to be involved in another Connection program. This evening, Jerry is responding to Lou Seifer. If you joined us last week, we shared a letter from Lou Seifer to Jerry, in which Lucifer, who we discovered, was concerned about Jerry's growing interest in spiritual things and deeply concerned about his growing involvement at church. And he gave Jerry some clear instructions. Simply put, don't get too involved, don't believe too much, and just kind of take care of yourself. Now, Jerry has a letter back to Lou, and he's going to share that with you now. And I know, listen close, you're going to find a lot of things that we can talk about later on. Jerry?
Thank you, Phil. Well, here it is. This is my response to Lou Seifer's letter of last week. Lou. I don't say dear Lou. I just say Lou. Lou, I received your letter the other day and read it carefully. And as difficult as it is, I'd like to begin my reply to you with a compliment. The points you make in your letter are well made and logical. Your persuasive techniques are so subtle that you fool many people and they don't even know it. It must bring you great delight to convince so many bright, well-meaning people to follow your way. You are a master at your craft. But then, you've been practicing since the beginning of time. You ought to be pretty good by now. I've often wondered how it's possible for you to fool bright people, people who read the Bible, people who attend church. I mean, I can understand how you can deceive a person here or there, but I confess that I'm awed by your ability to persuade vast numbers of people to your way and lead them astray. I've looked at amazement over the last 20 years at the dwindling membership in large Christian denominations. Surely this is your work. I have looked with particular interest at my own denomination, United Methodist, and with great sadness note that it's one of the leaders in the decline. Why do you seem to focus your attention on our denomination? Could it be that it is the one that causes you the greatest concern? Could it be that the United Methodist Church, if set free, could turn those numbers around and lead the way to a great spiritual revolution? It seems to me that each time we take a step as a church in that direction, you divert our attention and fill our minds and hearts with fear and take us away from the real work and joy of the church. How do you do this? What is your secret technique? How can you cause well-meaning people, church people, to take their eyes from Jesus and turn their eyes toward you? How can you kill off churches filled with intelligent people? Now, in your letter to me of the last week, you called me a slow learner. Well, maybe I am. I may be slow, but I eventually do catch on. And although it's taken me all of my life, I think I finally discovered you and the secret you use to win people over to your side. And it's so simple, I'm surprised that I haven't discovered it sooner. Here's your secret. Your secret is logic. Logic. Does it surprise you that I know? The very tool that is highly prized by the world is the one you use most effectively. With your logic, you try to convince us that we have the ability to know and understand everything, and that we can somehow reason out every phase of our lives from start to finish. You try to convince us that if we can't see it or figure it out for ourselves, it's not real. You tell us to avoid everything that is not logical. But God is beginning to show me and others that faith has nothing to do with logic. God cannot be found in logic. He can only be found in faith. But when we even think about taking a step of faith, you put so many logical thoughts in our mind that we become paralyzed with fear and can't move. I'm sure in those moments when you stop us cold in our tracks, you turn your head and snicker at our weaknesses. Even the dictionary we have puts faith before logic. But you've convinced us to turn it the other way around in our lives. I believe that the First United Methodist Church in Michigan City is beginning to make you a little nervous, because others here besides myself have also discovered your secret, and like me are beginning to spread the word. And you are plainly outraged by this. You will not make it easy for us to trust our faith. You will fight to the very end. But those of us who have discovered you with God's help will not allow any of your obstacles to stand in our way. And as time goes on, more and more people will find you out and turn away from you. Along with others, we're going through the painful process of finding out what it means to be a church, not just to act like a church. My letter back to you would not be complete without my response to the points you made about the church outlined in your letter. I will not accept your advice, and though I have a long way to go, I will strive toward the following points and thoughts. First, outsiders. The Church of Jesus Christ, which is this church, there are no such thing as outsiders. We are all members of the same family, and we will welcome any who come to us as we would welcome Christ himself. Rich, poor, well, sick, young, old, black, white, all are welcome here. Ministers. Ministers have been called to their vocation by God. They have been sent to us not to entertain us, but to teach us. Not so much to be administrators as to be shepherds. Not to squeeze our money from us, but to show us the joy that comes from a life of giving. As Christ has given them one of the most joyous and one of the most difficult vocations possible. Next, money. Every dime I have, and every dime I will ever have, does not and will not ever belong to me. I do not believe that giving money to the church or to the needy will cause any financial hardships for me in any way. I believe that I will be repaid tenfold for everything I give away. That includes giving away my time, giving away my energy, or giving away my money. Keep church in church. I believe that this place, this building, is nothing more than a building that should, along with everything in it, be completely worn out and used up in the service of God. Jesus wants us to go to church, but far more than that, he wants us to be a church 24 hours a day. Faith. My prayer is that each day God will give me the strength and the wisdom to turn away from your logic, to believe the things of God that I cannot see. I know that you would have me lead a small, self-centered life. I know that Christ wants me and all believers to lead a life that not only has no limits, but no end. In 2 Corinthians it says, we will walk by faith, not by sight. I pray for the strength to choose faith in my life. Work. I will read the Bible. I will study the way of Jesus, but I will not stop there. Along with others, we will most of all be doers of the word, We will, with God's help, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the prisoner, and heal the sick. You will not make us smug with our scriptural knowledge. We will set the church on fire by putting the Word of God in action. Prayer. You tell us that when we pray, we're talking to ourselves, that there is no God to hear us. But I tell you, we will cause every obstacle you put in our path to melt away with our unspoken words to God. Finally, music. We know that every selection in our hymnal is someone's witness to a touch from God. The pages in our hymnal are filled not with empty words, but the real experiences of real people. As we sing these hymns, we will think about the words and pray that God will make our own witness as strong and as real as these. In closing, Lou, I'd like to remind you of one of your most difficult cases, one of your dropouts, George Muller. I know the mere mention of his name is revolting to you and causes you much discomfort. I think it was in the late 19th century when you almost persuaded George Muller to come to your way. He found his life full of material things, but empty of purpose. You recall the day, perhaps, Lou, when he turned from your way for good and decided to live his life based on faith, not logic. He began to provide food and clothing and shelter for orphans. He accepted no salary for his work and trusted in God to provide every need as well as the needs of the children that he cared for. Over his 70-year ministry, God brought him hundreds of children and unsolicited gifts for more than $7 million. Unsolicited gifts of more than $7 million. An inconceivable amount back then. But of all the miracles that surrounded his ministry, I want to remind you, Lou, of just one. Because it is this one I would like to take as a model for my life. It was early in his ministry. He was in one of his first orphanages with about 35 children and 2 women helpers, and it was dinner time and there wasn't a scrap of food to be found anywhere in the house. The children were hungry, and the 2 women helpers came to him and asked what they should do since there was no food in the house to feed the children. He calmly replied, "Set the table and call the children." They all said grace over empty plates. They said grace over empty plates. And after the amen, there came a knock at the door. It seems that a milk wagon had broken down outside. The driver said that he couldn't get the milk to market, it would spoil. Could anyone in there use the milk? So the children had milk. While they were drinking their milk, there came another knock at the door. It seems that a baker with some extra rolls and bread that hadn't sold that day had wanted to make them available to the children of the orphanage. George Muller was a simple man who simply believed what God said. As for me, I want to stand with the George Mullers of the world and millions like him who have turned away from you and your clever logic and have learned to have faith in the promises of God. Signed, Jerry Scott.
Oh, what a powerful, powerful letter. As you all, I know, are well aware, Jerry is a very unique and rare Christian man. And his humbleness and his discomfort in my saying that aloud is only another sign of just what a unique person Jerry is. That is an incredibly gifted letter and an incredibly wise response to Lucifer. Grace over empty plates. I must have found 15 sermons in here. You know, even now I'm working on sermons.
Good.
Grace over empty.
That is.
Are you a Christian that can say grace over an empty plate?
Had you heard that story before?
No,
George?
No, I had not.
Well, the first time I think it was in Guideposts or something like that. My wife read it to me, and I just sat there, and it affected me, I'm sure, the same way that it's affected you. I mean, that is faith. That is, remember the hymn, Standing on the Promises? I mean, that is standing on the promises.
Absolutely.
Saying grace over empty plates. Oh, it just gets into my heart.
Well, we need to find more of that in our lives, and I know I need to find more of that in my life. I want to get at the heart of Jerry's letter, or at least what I think, and dialogue with him a little bit about the letter he responded. And first, I'd like to begin just with the whole principle of responding to Satan, because I think we have this mistaken notion that Lucifer is all-powerful. I mean, that's also part of his attack here, that in the end, it is his logic, it is his power, it's his craft that's going to win out. And the first thing about your letter is to remind Lucifer that God has made us free to choose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in that power, he must tremble as much as any power. I mean, even though he uses it, he doesn't want us to know we've got choice. Mm-hmm. And, and even now, even in this evening, on this Wednesday night, at the end of this connection program, you and I have choice. And we can choose God, or choose Satan, choose the dark one. Now, of course, nobody turns their life over to Satan. I mean, I don't think anybody does that intentionally.
I don't think so either.
Would you agree with me?
Well, I would hope
not. What we turn
not.
our life over to is, nobody says, well, today I'm going to serve evil.
Yeah.
I'm going to be as mean, as rotten as I can. Nobody does that.
I think there's some strange people in the world. I mean, there are these weird factions but I don't think any sane, solid-thinking person would ever.
I think what we tend to do is turn our life over to logic, or as you say, to reason, or to just the way the world wants it to be.
Absolutely.
And not remembering or seeing or experiencing the power of God.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you wrote that letter?
When I wrote the first two, I read the screw tape letters. I can't even think of the guy that wrote them now. Who's
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. And the screw tape letters were a dialogue between two devils, a senior devil and a junior devil and so on. And C.S. Lewis writes some pretty heady stuff. And I had, frankly, trouble understanding some of the stuff that he was writing in there. And then I got to thinking, this little dialogue goes on between, the dark one and myself. I mean, I hear this person. So I started to write these thoughts down, and they really started to come out. And it was, in a way, it was kind of a cleansing process for me.
I could see, wouldn't it be wonderful if every Christian could have two letters like that in a dialogue in one's life about, here is the temptations and here is my response. Mm-hmm. Did you feel stronger after that?
I absolutely did.
I can sense it in your letter, the strength from your letter. Mm-hmm. I want to pick up a couple points with you. To be a church, to be the church and not to act like the church. Mm-hmm. To be a Christian, not to act.
Oh, yeah, I find myself going through the motions of acting like a Christian. I mean, there's. Well, I'll tell you. I'll give you an example. And this story haunts me to this day. Last year, I was in Chicago right around this time, driving into Chicago. And I was driving right up Lakeshore Drive there by the lake, and there's a space of, I guess, about a half a mile from Lakeshore Drive till you get to Michigan Avenue or wherever. And I remember this was one of the coldest days that there. I mean, this day was just absolutely freezing. And I'm sitting there with my coat on, in my warm car, and I look out the window, and here's a man leaning against the wind with the wind, this chill blowing his face, and had on not short sleeves, but shirt sleeves, not a coat. And his face was almost, looked chiseled as though it was almost frozen, And I said to myself, I have to stop. I have to get out. But I didn't. I didn't. And And I will forever see that guy. You know, I thought of the Good Samaritan. I mean, you know, I drove right by this guy. So I think that you know, when it comes to being the church or being a Christian, I mean, for me, it's a struggle every single day. And God gives me whatever strength I have. And, you know, you just constantly have to think about it. You constantly have to work on it. You constantly have to let it grow in your life.
What do you think at home? Jerry's point is to be the church is not just to act church, not to play church. And what are some of the things you'd point to say that here's being the church? Jerry, for you, it's clear one of the things is service, is a church being in service, being involved. As a friend of mine said, we're proud of a church, any church, that when someone says what's going on at your church, you can say more than just the Sunday morning worship schedule. You know, that has to be a part of it, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. The soup kitchen is a very important you know, part of the church's ministry, and there just really is something to be said for you know, and you know, don't get me wrong when I say this. Bible studies are wonderful. I mean, it's important to know and read and understand the Bible. So, but if that's as far as it gets, you know, Satan or whoever it is keeping you from you know, getting in there, getting involved, is really robbing you from the real. You put a bowl of soup in front of somebody that isn't going to eat that day, and that's.
You're right on target. You're right on target. You know, the church has to be more than just dialogue and conversation and giving thought to things. You know, if it doesn't ever issue forth in an action, you know, it's empty. That's what the whole epistle of James is about. If you want to read what James is trying, James isn't saying that grace is unimportant. James is just arguing with us that if it doesn't issue in something,
right?
You know, and how many times do we sit around in committee meetings? It's killing us. It's killing us as a denomination. We sit around in committee meetings, making plans as if we were doing something, when all we're really doing is just kind of talking around.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
Nothing
we go
happens.
home and say, what'd you do now? Well, we had this committee meeting.
Do you know the book Where Cross the Crowded Ways
by Gary Forbes?
Your friend.
Yes.
Has a line in there that, you know, that I remember, and it talks about, you know, the people that walk by, the needy, the sick, the hungry, the hurting people that walk by the church and walk through as the church casts its irrelevant shadow over them, you know. I don't want to go to a church. I don't want to be in a church that casts an irrelevant shadow over the needy people in the community, you know?
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that Lucifer's attack upon the church is to get it to try to make itself unimportant? I mean, it makes us think these things are important. You know, we've got to have the right people here. Or these things are important. All the people here need to be alike and act alike and look like, you know, these things are important. We don't dare let anybody sit in our sofa, you know, or use our parlor.
Oh, we might get it dirty.
Or you know, or overuse the elevator, you know. You know, that those issues where he puts into our mind are the ones that are going to kill us, are going to make us irrelevant.
This is absolutely so. I say in here.
That's how cunning. You compliment him on
I believe this, and when I talk about the church here, that it's a building, and everything in it, everything should be worn out, used up in the service of God, and that includes everything in this building: the carpet, the sofas, the everything.
Yes.
Worn out, used up. You know, we have to give these things away. I mean, you know.
We're not all there yet.
No,
Jerry and I have talked about this and talked about it, and I know you're going to talk about this too. You know, what do? You know, you have to make decisions. We're not perfect yet, but I think the church is right. I like the idea in your letter that maybe United Methodist Church is under the attack of Lou and his henchmen, because he's most worried about the sleeping giant that still awaits in the hearts of Methodists.
It could very well be.
You know, we were founded by a John Wesley. If you've never read about John Wesley, a lot of us wouldn't maybe like his lifestyle. But let me tell you about this little dynamic man who at 82 was still out begging for alms for the poor in the winter in London, who founded hospitals and orphanages and libraries, and wanted people to experience health. We just really need to rediscover John and Charles, and why this great creature called the United Methodists got started in the first place. There's some good history back there to be captured.
Oh yes, oh yes. And you know, John Wesley, he was like, in many ways like George Muller. He was an ordinary guy.
That's right.
But he was extraordinary in the fact that he also believed what Jesus said.
That's right.
And
I want to get back to that. I want us to end up there. We're running out of time. And first, before we do, to the double tragedy of when you said about bright people, why bright people get led away from the church. Does Lucifer do that good a job, or are our young people, are we not doing a good enough job? Are we totally irrelevant to bright young people's lives today?
Well, you know, I think it was on one of the previous connections that I quoted a little bit about from a cellist, Pablo Casals, who said, "We teach our children that Paris is the capital of France and the 2 and 2 are 4, but we really don't teach them who they are." And you can use logic for Paris as the capital of France, and we hone the logical skills in school. And our children are wonderful logicians, and when we start to talk to them about faith and about love your enemies, I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's not logical, and maybe that's where the disconnect comes. I don't know.
Well, it's on my heart, maybe on some of our listeners' hearts tonight, to think about why we're not reaching out to our brightest and best and turning their lives on to Jesus Christ. Perhaps we must not let doubt overcome us. Even that becomes the tool of the dark one. And maybe we need to begin where Jerry ended, which is grace over empty plates. Giving thanks to God over empty pews. Giving thanks to God over programs that aren't as full as we think they ought to be. And let God begin to lead us and guide the church. I hope you're a person that can say grace over an empty plate. I hope you're that kind of Christian. And if you're not, well, join with the rest of us, because we're all going to try to be. And we're going to set off this week to do it a little better. Jerry, 2 tremendous letters, 2 tremendous connection programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're enjoying this new style of our dialogue and discussion. Join us next week, won't you, for more connection.